UCLA's Labor Relations has been circulating their interpretation of our contract as instructions for departments on how to change graduate student workers' work duties to fit online teaching. This document contains a vision of degraded graduate work and unsuitable working conditions that is disgraceful. UC is capitalizing on a human tragedy and global crisis to institute a unilateral move to remote teaching. This kind of precedent will affect public education for years to come if we let it happen. These guidelines for our amended duties rest on a couple of dangerous assumptions. One, that they had the authority to move the university online and into our homes in the first place. And two, that UC's workers have accepted this new modality as fair and acceptable. But neither of these is true. First, in order to conceive of each and every one of our thousands and thousands of homes as new work sites, you need to do a very convoluted reading of our collective bargaining agreement. The majority of this video is devoted to exactly that imprecise and insidious reading that they have put forth. Second, these guidelines give the impression that this is a settled matter, when actually UCOP and our union, UAW 2865, are in active bargaining over COVID-19 working conditions. They are laying the groundwork for actively undermining our collective bargaining agreement. These suggestions are not coming from educators or professors, or anyone with even the most minor investment in the integrity of the public university system. This is from the minds of lawyers whose typical daily grind is to read our contract for ways that the university cannot be held accountable. Under COVID, their task is to read it for ways that we can be more creatively exploited both now and in the future. So let's get into some of the lawyers' suggestions for how departments should start to treat us now that we're facing some of the darkest times many of us have ever seen. To zoom out, we can start with the university's decision to move classes online. Sure, this is an action that's happening everywhere, but where's the legal justification? Labor Relations cites management rights to choose the location of work, but surely this is meant to be a location on campus or pedagogical sites such as museums or field sites. What court of law would accept that work site could be literally anyone's home or lack thereof for our houseless colleagues? What makes someone's cramped apartment, now occupied with kids home from school or loud neighbors in the background, an acceptable work site? What makes someone's shared bedroom with no desk space, given that we don't make enough money to live in dignified housing, an acceptable work site? In the event that enrollment isn't high enough for a class and it's canceled, Labor Relations' suggestion for reassigning the TAs of that class is to create a tech support position for them. They cite management and academic rights, again, Article 18, noting that the university can designate work duties. But again, this is an extremely screwed up interpretation that is unacceptable. If their rights are that broad, why don't they hire TAs to do whatever departments need in a pinch? Accounting? Front desk work? Administrative assistants? This reading of the contract suggests that they would like just that. We're already a desperately impoverished workforce that would do literally any task to stay enrolled and alive. This is a transparent attempt to create precedent for a very broad interpretation of work duties for graduate workers and displace other professional staff on campus in the future. The most appalling part of this particular interpretation is that it attempts to evoke the spirit of academic freedom, the notion that university faculty have the unique intellectual freedom to delegate teaching labor in their classes. And we believe in this right, but we believe that asking faculty to use it in this way is disrespectful to the very notion of academic freedom itself. We genuinely believe that our professors who sponsor our research and candidacy at UCLA will rise above using their intellectual rights and powers to decide that an appropriate use of their students' PhD training is to work as underpaid temporary tech support. Next, we have Labor Relations' radical reading of Article 25, Training and Orientation. They suggest to departments that workers should not log time that they are learning new technology to teach online as work hours. Instead, they seem to be laying the groundwork for pointing to training courses such as 375 and 495. We should all be extremely concerned about this interpretation and the precedent it would set. If learning a new technology isn't work, then they can argue down to the line that a first-time TA who took a long time to grade their papers was simply learning to use Gradebook and should not get paid for these hours, even if, for any number of reasons, the amount of time that it took had nothing to do with them. Since this is an outright attack on our contractual work hours, they are clearly laying the foundation for denying wrongdoing in the future. Finally, we get to this very interesting section where labor relations strongly encourages departments to send supplemental letters informing students about their new position and work duties for student workers to sign. This is not required in order to implement these new changes, but rather acts as a hedge against complaints about our new standard of living. Their operating modus is that students and faculty will acquiesce to these new terms and not ask about whether or not their rights are being violated because it's what the lawyer said was in the contract. This is in keeping with a long history of the university acting in disregard with our contract, only stopping when they are called out. But a contract is just another text that can be read in many ways, and we as workers have the right to contest readings of it in grievance arbitrations. But it's much more convenient for them if student workers individually sign on to their absurd interpretation of our contract and work duties, and get enlisted into building some of the most dangerous precedent for higher education many of us have seen, from moving an entire quarter online to redefining the very nature of graduate work. But departments should refrain from writing these letters. Faculty should advise their students not to sign them, and student workers should not sign anything that agrees to labor relations' interpretation of our contract. These are uncertain and unprecedented times, but these legal contortions cannot happen without the consent of its workers. Not only do we not have to consent to this, they cannot fire us for deciding not to, and they can't do any of this without us.